So if you're with us, thank you so much for worshiping with us. Thanks for being at Bethlehem, choosing to spend a few moments of your weekend with other believers before God at Bethlehem Church. It's been an awesome time. If you're watching online, thank you. I've been excited about this season for some time. This series called Jesus is Better. And let me set it up. I need you, if you will, to imagine the best you can to set the context for where I want to go. Is I need you to put yourself in the scene, again, the best you can. I know it's not perfect, but a cold, dreary night on the outskirts of Jerusalem, a collection of 20 to 30, maybe as many 40 followers of Jesus are gathered in a one-bedroom house. And by one-bedroom house, I mean a shack, a mud hut, kind of held together by hay and wood. They're tired, they're weary, they're struggling. They've been faithful, they've been vigilant, they've endured suffering, they've endured persecution. And the truth is, things on the horizon don't look a lot better. Things don't seem to be getting easier. There's incredible pressure they're facing both externally and internally to tamper down their message to go back to the way things once were. 30 to 40 years ago, what began as a movement of people following a rabbi, a carpenter's son who claimed to be God, this man Jesus, had moved from a flicker in the night to a flame that had swept across an entire region, had pushed against the government systems of the day, the Roman Empire dominating Jerusalem, and it also pushed against early Judaism, the religious system of the day. Jesus had been murdered after 33 years. And it wasn't his murder that captured an audience. It was the fact that 3 days later, he resurrected. He came back to life. And now people were convinced that this was God's Son. This was the way of salvation. Salvation was found in no one else but this man. Jesus' life and message had taken hold, had pushed against the status quo. And when you push against the status quo, take it from a guy who's done it here and there from time to time, the status quo has a way of pushing back. And so the Roman government now no longer sees this movement, the way, people of the way, these early Christ followers, they no longer see this movement as just pests to be ignored, but a problem to be stomped out. And the Jews in which Christianity arose from, the Jewish system of the day was saying, don't make things harder for us, just come back to the way things were. This is second generation believers. Many of them, this early group of believers, have been led to Jesus, led to faith in Jesus because their relatives, their friends were eyewitnesses of Jesus' life. They were true believers. They weren't professors of a faith. They believed their life had been changed, and they were being told to shut up, to sit down, to be quiet, and to go home. And it was in a real way. Everything around these early believers was shifting. Things were getting harder. Culture was changing. Insecurity, worry, angst, fear, all gripped their heart. And there was a temptation to do one of two things: either completely reject the faith that they had found, or to get really quiet about them. And in their mind, neither was a great option. And in this context is where the sermon, the book that we call in the New Testament, Hebrews, comes blazing in to early Jewish Jesus followers facing intense pressure, full of insecurity and fear, and beginning to look and need for confidence and clarity in what they were doing. And then we have Hebrews. And Hebrews is not a letter like much of the New Testament in which Paul wrote is to a specific church. It's really more of a sermon, a rally cry to all churches at this time, to all believers at this time, that they would anchor their confidence, that they would find clarity in this declaration that Jesus is better. The author of Hebrews uses that phrase, better, associated with Jesus 13 different times in Hebrews, the only time you see it in all of Scripture. And he's referring to Jesus compared to everything, good things, great things, bad things, you name it. That's what he is using. And so starting in this series, this day, until about Thanksgiving break, which is 7 weeks from now. Man, time flies, doesn't it? Which is about 7 weeks from now. We're going to take a deep dive into the book of Hebrews, but here's what's going to be interesting about this series. We're going to come back over the next 18 months as a church to this one theme from time to time. Jesus is better. There's no way I could preach through Hebrews in 7 weeks. My seminary professor would not give me a degree if I said I could do that. It's impossible, so I'm not even going to try. But this is a rich, robust, meaty book. Hebrews is not a walk in the park. The sermon that is Hebrews gives, though, a deep and abiding confidence that God is with us, that God is for us, and there is more that's happening around us than we even realize. It is not a book that tries to fan the flame of our emotions to go, it's going to be okay, nor does it try to coddle our feelings when things are hard. Jesus came as the Messiah, not as just the Jewish Messiah, but he came as a Jew, born as a Jew. Right? But his message of salvation was to all people in all places and at all times. In this Jewish context, the Old Testament, which you and I know, if you have your scriptures, the Old Testament, the first 39 books of the Bible are at a different time and a different place. And there's all type of rituals and ceremonies and laws and festivals. And there's all this rich tradition. But the reality, none of those were wrong, but none of them were complete. The Old Testament was a story in need of a conclusion, and Jesus was that conclusion. And that conclusion, what the author's going to argue is to think of faith in any other context but the person of Jesus is to miss it altogether. And what this book does is it holds up the supremacy, the finality, and the beauty of Jesus compared to any and everything. It is a book of doctrine. That just lit your fire, didn't it? It's a book of doctrine. Let me say it again, not doctors, doctrine. In fact, it's a book of doctrine, and we don't ever use that word, right? Doctrine. In fact, just because it's fun and you guys are a great crowd, let's just say it together. It's going to just light my heart on fire when the whole church says doctrine. All right, so we're going to do it on the count of 3. We're going to look at the person you came with, and I want you to say this only time you're going to say it all week is going to be right here. And it's going to be so cool. It's going to change your life for the rest of the week. On the count of 3, we're going to say it like we mean it. Doctrine. 1, 2, 3. That's what this book of, and if there's anything the modern church is missing, it's doctrine. It's what this book, if there's anything that's been lost. So there's 3 things that I think all of us have to be able to speak to, and I think at times we're not able to. And here, I put them in your notes, and here's why this is going to be a reoccurring theme over the next season of the life of our church. Do I know what I believe? If you're taking notes on the back of your bulletin, do I know what I believe? Now, I didn't ask what you think, right? I asked what you believe. I didn't ask, do you have an opinion on things? You got an opinion on things. I got an opinion on things. We all got an opinion on things. I didn't ask what you've been told to believe. Well, Jason, man, I wouldn't be here. I definitely believe there's a God. That's great. Even the demons believe there's a God. But there's got to be, what are you convinced of at your soul level? What are you questioning at your soul level that you just don't say out loud, especially in settings like this? And here's the next thing. Do I know why I believe what I believe? Is it because you've been around it all your life? Do you believe what you believe because it's what your parents believed? Is the why behind what you believe when it comes to Christianity simply this? Well, it works for my family and it works for us. That's kind of that's all that really matters, is because it's my personal faith and my personal belief, and it kind of works for me. Listen. There was a time when being a Christian in America, especially in the Deep South, when Christianity was seen as simply adopting the civic religion of the day, the belief of your parents or grandparents that was passed down from one generation to generation. Even though that wasn't biblical, it was sufficient in our minds. And as your pastor, and my call to be pastor's shepherd at times, I need you to hear this. Let me state it as much as I can. Those days are gone and are never coming back. Never coming back. Every person, no matter your age, you need to hear me. What you believe will be tested, period. In conversations, in life experiences, in outside voices. So that brings us to this. Am I confident in why I believe what I believe? So this is what's the interesting part. I'm getting worked up. I got to slow down, okay? This is the interesting part. Not just for a church nerd like me, okay? This is what's fascinating. You can actually not be confident in why you believe what you believe and still be a consumer because it works for you. See, you can actually, I'm not 100% confident, but I think and I see that it works and I just kind of believe and I'm out there. You can actually not be confident in why you believe what you believe, but it still works for you and it doesn't really change you. But here's the problem. If you aren't confident in why you believe what you believe, you will not be a witness, you'll just be a consumer. And the scripture calls us to have a voice. See, we face external pressure in our time. The tides of our society have shifted. I have said it and will continue to say it, and I'm going to say it till I'm blue in my face and I don't have any hair on my head. You and I live in a post-Christian society. Many of us were not born into that. We were born into a time where everybody shared a kind of moral fabric or moral compass. Not that everybody was Bible-believing Christians, but there was a general moral compass, right? That has moved. Post does not mean anti-Christian. Let me make sure I say that. No matter what Fox News says, post doesn't mean anti-Christian, right? Post means that Christian ethics, Judeo-Christian principles or values, which even the most hardened atheists would say, our country, many of the systems were found on Judeo-Christian values, that those scripture, they're not front and center anymore. They've been pushed to the margins. That's what it means. But here's the practical pressure. That's just me talking philosophical pastor here. Here's the practical pressure of living in a post-Christian society. You and I are also living in a post-truth time. Now, what does that mean? Stephen Colbert, who hosts the late night show on CBS, I'm not sure if you watch a late night show. If you do, he's one of the main three that host it. He coined a term a few years back that I think gives, and I didn't put this in your notes, but it just gives he literally made it up on the spot, but I think it gives a great definition to the place we find ourselves in. He coined the term truthiness. Great name, right? This isn't in your notes, but let me kind of describe when I say we live in a post-truth time. Colbert says truthiness. Here's his definition, right? Made it up. The quality of preferring concepts or facts one wishes to be true rather than concepts or facts known to be true. Let me translate, like bottom line it, okay? I like to believe what I want to be true, what I feel, whether it's true or not. I know you say that's a stated fact, but that's just not what I believe. Well, what? But that's where we've moved. Right, like truthiness. Give me an example. I believed my team was the number 2 team in the country. Right here. I wanted it. Maybe we'll come back to it, but not yesterday, right? It's wanting something. It's just not a reality, man. When objective historical facts and reasoning is less influential in shaping a person or the public's opinion than emotional feelings, we're in an incredibly interesting time. Let me say that again. Objective historical facts and reasoning is less influential in shaping a person's or the public's opinion less than emotion is, way less. So when you live and breathe into society, here's what happens. It's amazing without ever having known it, how quickly we lose the truth of our faith for our favorite version of our faith. In a post-truth society, we are tolerant towards everything except absolute truth. Tolerant toward everything. See, living for Jesus has never been easy. Like following Jesus has just never been easy. If you're like, well, it's pretty easy in my head. I mean, it's not, well, if it's pretty easy in your head and it's not hard, it's probably because you're doing it wrong. Because Jesus says, in this life you'll have trouble. In this life you'll be persecuted. Not some of you will. Right? But in this world, Jesus teaches this stuff. And the reality is, What happens is we end up settling for a lesser faith that doesn't cost us anything. And so here's what I'm convinced of, and here's what I want to say. Here's why we're going to come back to this theme over the next 18 months. Jesus is better. Over and over again, I'm going to come back to it. Because what I am convinced, I need every grandparent in this room to hear, every parent in this room to hear, every student, every college student, every single adult. Listen to me. Eyeball to eyeball, you need to hear me say this. It is only going to get harder to follow Jesus in our day and time. It is only, when things get hard, one of two things happen. You walk away altogether, or you just get quiet and don't say anything. Neither of those are options. But if I were to give you, and I will in the coming weeks, the statistics on millennials and Gen Z that are walking away from the faith, rejecting their parents' faith, it's startling. It should make us queasy and shiver in our seats. So here's the big idea. You and I live in a time where we feel what we believe, where we believe what we feel, even if it's not true. You can tell I'm ready to go, man. Could go all day. We live in a time where we believe what we feel, even if it's not true. But listen to me. You and I as believers choose to believe what is true, even if we don't feel it. We choose to believe what is true. That is the tension. So Hebrews 1, verse 1, to give us confidence why the book of Hebrews is written. Here's what it says. Long ago, at many times, in many ways, God spoke to our fathers by the prophets. God's always been, since the beginning of a time, our God, the God of the Scriptures, the God of Christianity, the God we believe is the one true God. It has never been a God that sits at a distance wanting us to guess how he is. There's never been a time when our God sits back and goes, man, I hope they figure out how I am. God never wanted that, us to see and sit off and see from how far. So God used people like Moses, Joshua, Isaiah, Daniel. I could go on listing them to speak to his people. That's what the author's saying. And look what it says in verse 2. But in these last days, not last days as in Revelation, but like in these most recent times, he has spoken to us by his Son, whom he appointed the heir of all things, through whom also he created the world. Now catch this. This is heavy lifting right here. He's the radiance of the glory of God. He's the exact imprint of his nature, and he upholds the universe by the word of his power. After making purification for sins, which means he made a way for us to have a relationship with God, he sat down at the right hand of the majesty on high. Having become much superior to angels is the name he's inherited, which is more excellent than theirs. Now the author just said a mouthful, but let me explain it. Let me tell you why it matters to you and I. Here's what I want you to put. Jesus is better. And remember the context we're writing. These early Christ followers that are facing intense, persecution, to go back to the way the first. He comes out of the gate, and here's what he says. Jesus is better. Why? Because he's greater than the prophets. Well, Jason, I don't have any problem with that. Hold on a second. Let me tell you why this should encourage us. Let me explain what's going on. Your faith does not rest on what has happened. Your faith rests on who Jesus is now. Moses, super. 10 Commandments, great, gave us direction, did not give us salvation. Isaiah said some fascinating things, all true from God, but his words weren't the final word. Every messenger and message before Jesus was incomplete. Here's what that practically means. I need you to listen, especially if you've been around religious things much of your life. Here's what that practically means. Bible stories and Bible characters are not the center of our faith. Some of us have got to leave a Sunday school understanding of that's just how my faith works. Bibles, they're supplemental, they're helpful, they're true, they're right. But Paul says in Corinthians, if Jesus hadn't been raised from the dead, what does it matter what the rest of them did? Jesus is the center of our faith. So here's what he says. Look at this. This is so good. He is the radiance of the glory of God. And I want you to underline this. I want you to circle this. If you got your Bibles, he's the exact imprint of his nature. So let me tell you, think about it like this. Have you ever been somewhere? Have you, like, you've been to a place that you went on vacation or you went on a trip and it was like, man, an exotic tropical island that was so beautiful. It just was like everything was at peace and tranquil and you were just blown away by the landscape. Or maybe you've been like skiing or this beautiful Grand Canyon, gone to the Rockies. You've seen it, man. You've been to a beautiful place. And so what we do is we take pictures and like you're a real photographer, not like an Instagram photographer. You're like the real deal. Right, and you've posted pictures and you've shown, and I mean, your heart was good and everything leapt and it was so good and it was so great. It was just, yeah, man. And you come home and you're with your friends or you're with your family who didn't get to go and you're showing them pictures, whether it's on your phone or like legit pictures. You're like, look at this, look at this. And I mean, you're describing it. You saw God, you met God. How could anybody ever doubt? It was so beautiful. And while you're doing it, here's what you know. They don't get it. Like you're trying to describe it the best you can. And it was unbelievable. It was brilliant. They don't get it. You ever been there? They don't get what I'm saying. Well, the author of Hebrews, listen, I was last week, 2 weeks ago, Nan and I were in Colorado Springs for a meeting with some pastors. And this guy, he comes to our table. It's about 20, 25 pastors. And this guy used to play for Clemson, so he's really big, and he's a pastor now. And he's been up to Pikes Peak. And I mean, he's just raving about how awesome Pikes Peak is. I mean, he's literally getting on to us about why we need to go to Pikes Peak. And he's like 300 pounds. I'm like, cool, let's go to Pikes Peak. Right? He's just so animated, so passionate, just yeah. We took off to go up there. My wife gets car sick real easy, so we didn't make it very long. But he almost convinced me because pastors are great storytellers. But here's what the author of Hebrews knows. Like words don't suffice. There's so much more than that. So I'm not even going to try to give you a description here. Think about it. Our culture, all of human history, we've always been mesmerized, pondered. What is God like? That's why the ancients had idols and images and history you read and stories, because we've always tried. I mean, that's in the heart. What is God like? Hebrews is not trying to tell us what God is like. Like when I was in high school, there was a song written by a lady named Joan Osborne 20 years ago. And I think Alanis Morissette redid it, and those names are of a different time and different place, back when you used to have buy CDs to listen to songs, okay? But there was a song that was like the hit when I was in high school. If God had a name, what would it be, and would you call it to his face? The lyrics were, if you were faced with him in all his glory, would you ask if you had just one question, if God had a face, what it looked like? Now, this wasn't a Christian tune. This wasn't what you listened to on the fish because it was safe for your whole family, okay? But I remember the song. We've always been fascinated with what is God like. But those words, he's the radiance of God's glory. He's the exact imprint of his nature. Hebrews is telling us, this author, here's why you can have confidence, and it's strange the way he does it. He's not even a reflection of God, Jesus isn't. Like I had a mirror on stage. You looked at a mirror before you came tonight. There's a really good chance you over there should have looked a little longer, okay? I'm kidding. I don't even know who I'm pointing to. But look, you know how it goes. Here's what when you look in the mirror above your vanity or in your bedroom, what it does, you know it just like this, when it shows you a reflection of yourself, what you look like on the outside. So that it shows you how tall you are, what you got going on your face or what you don't got going on, your hair, your lack thereof. It just shows you what you look like on the outside. All of us it shows you a reflection. But here's what a mirror can't do, and you know this. A mirror can show you what you look like, but a mirror can't show you what's going on the inside. Like a mirror doesn't reveal a man or a woman's nature. It doesn't reveal a man or a woman's attitude, their fears, their ambitions. It shows you a reflection. Well, like a mirror can show you what someone looks like, but it doesn't show you what someone's like. Come on. Listen to me. Here's the confidence you and I can have. Here's what the writer of Hebrews is trying to invoke from the get-go, the core of our faith, why you and I can be confident. Here's what he's saying. Jesus isn't an example of what God is like, church. Jesus doesn't have features that are kind of like God. Jesus doesn't even come with a word from God for us. Jesus isn't even a reflection of God. Here's why Jesus is better. Here's why this author is trying to convince them he's greater than the prophets. Church, listen to me, because Jesus is God. That's what he's saying. You and I, as Christ followers, we don't have to ask the question, what is God like? We know it, and it's Jesus. We know it, and it's Jesus. And there are many people who bear the name Christ and who bear the title Christianity that still ponder what God's like. You don't have to. It is Jesus. He's the exact imprint of what? His nature. That's the power. You and I have never, our ancestors have never been asked to have a faith in a God that's distant, doesn't reveal himself. There's never been one time. God fully reveals himself to us in the person of Jesus Christ. Like, knowing about God's good, but you can still lack confidence. Knowing God's ways is good, but you can still lack confidence. But what you need to know is in the person of Jesus Christ, you know God. What I would say lovingly, as passionately as I can, I find too often in the Christian faith, even in this room, we use language that's very God this and God that, and is very God broad. Drop it, stop it. You don't talk about a broad God. You have a Lord Jesus, and that is God. And he is God. And what I found how illiterate we are in our faith is it's God this and God this and God this and God this. God's name is Jesus. That's the confidence you can have. We're not wondering, I wonder what God's like. He's Jesus. That's what he's saying. The sovereign creator of the universe came as a man. And he gave us salvation by faith. And by that salvation, you and I know the sovereign God of this universe. See, he doesn't end there. Here's what else he says. Jesus is greater than the angels. Well, Jason, I haven't thought about angels in forever. I guess Christmas is coming up. I'm going to hang some on my tree. I don't know what that's got to do with me. Well, let me explain, because it's got a lot. There was a growing fascination in the intertestamental periods in angels. What do you mean? Between Malachi, the last book of the Old Testament, and Matthew, the first book of the New Testament, there's about 400 years of silence. 400 years, like God had not spoken through a prophet or any other means. And so what had happened, because they're under the tyranny of Rome, is Jews in Jerusalem had kind of gotten into some folklore talking about angel armies who were going to come take out nasty, naughty Rome. In fact, theology began to kind of immerse of personal angels, where you and I get the term guardian angels. So there's one that sits on your front bumper and one that sits on your back, our guardian, that your kid or that you have a personal guardian angel. That's where this is arisen from. Angels were seen as messengers and protectors. And here's what the author is going to say. Jesus is much more than that. Look in verse 5. For to which of the angels did God ever say, you're my son? Today I've begotten you, or again, I will be to him a father, and he shall be to me a son. None of them. And again, when he brings the firstborn in the world, he says, let all God's angels worship him. Of the angels, he says, he makes his angels winds and his ministers a flame of fire. He's quoting the Old Testament there. But of the Son, he says, your throne, O God. Jesus is completely different. It's forever and ever. The scepter of uprightness is the scepter of your kingdom. You've loved righteousness, you've hated wickedness. Therefore, God, your God, has anointed you with all the oil of gladness before your companions. Now, there's a ton there. My wife's been reading through Hebrews with me while I'm teaching, and she's like, Jason, what does that mean for anybody right there? Let me explain, because that's pretty dense language. He uses Psalms, he uses Deuteronomy, and he takes 2 Samuel, and he tries to set the record straight. Takes verses about angels. You can keep reading in chapter 1, he does the same thing. And the argument he's making to these early Christ followers is very real. The angels worship Christ. It's not Christ who worships the angels. The angels declared the birth of Christ. It is not Christ who declares the ministry of the angels. That's what he's saying. But here's the question. Here's where it gets interesting. The question up under their fascination with angels was basically this. How's my angel going to personally serve me and rescue me? How's my personal angel going to serve my best interest in work things out for me. And what this author is saying is, listen to me, do not reduce Jesus to some angel that you want to work things out for you. Some angel that you want to work things out for you. Listen to me, Bethlehem Church. When we reduce in our life Jesus to simply how's he going to protect us from a mean and naughty world, how's he going to work bad things out in our life, right, for the way we want it, how does Jesus serve me? Then all we've done is our picture, I think, in the American church often is Jesus as a really cool guardian angel. And we've missed Jesus altogether. How's he going to serve? And how's he going to work out? That was the theology, my guardian angel, my personal angel. And that author's going, whoa, 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 whoa. Let me give you confidence. Jesus is none of those things. The question is never, how does Jesus serve us? The question is, are we worshipers of the God of this universe whose name is Jesus? That's the question. I think we've missed it because often in our wealth and our comfort, it's Jesus serving us. A letter written from a Chinese pastor, a leader in the church in China, which has exploded, by the way, under great persecution. They can't publicly gather, and the church has exploded. That's why darkness and things getting tougher doesn't make me scared, because I think that's when God works the greatest. But a leader in the church in China wrote a letter to a bunch of Christian pastors, and he says, my fear and my prayer for you, and here's why I fear and I pray for you. I feel like we've handled our persecution better than you're handling your prosperity. I think he's right. Because we've reduced the God of this universe to a guardian angel that we put on a bumper sticker or tweet a verse about or say we have a Bible verse in our home and that Jesus, come on. It's way more than that. See, here's what the writer of Hebrews is saying. Jesus is the final word. Everything before him is incomplete. We'll talk about in the weeks to come. Everything written in the future is suspect. So you need to hear me right here, because I'm going to unpack this in the next few weeks. We will talk about this. When somebody says, when some book, when some speaker, when some friend of yours says, I've got a word for God from you, a revelation for God, from God for you that doesn't refute Jesus but adds to Jesus, you better be suspect. I got a word for you. I got a feeling that this is a word for you. Maybe, or maybe you ate a bad burrito last night. Why? Jesus is the final word. And if Jesus isn't enough, then you've missed Jesus. What are you saying? If and I didn't get a chance to put this in your notes, but you want to write something down that we're going to come back to time and time again. If our definition of Jesus doesn't change everything about us, then we don't have a biblical definition of Jesus. If our definition of Jesus doesn't change everything about us, Bethlehem Church, we don't have a biblical definition of Jesus. He's the only one worthy of our worship. That's why Hebrews comes back time and time again, over and over again, because it comes back to worship, because whatever you worship will sustain you. Now let me tell you a label that sticks for all of us in this room, me included right here. This label sticks to every person in this room. If you're watching online, it sticks to you especially. I'm kidding. I love you if you're watching online. Here's what it sticks. You and I are consumers. I'm right there in there. Like most of us make a living on the fact that somebody consumes the product or the service that we sell or give. Nothing wrong with consumerism. Right? That's just the way it is. We are all consumers. In fact, like I'm a consumer. Let me tell you, like a couple of weeks ago I had a birthday. Let me tell you what I got for my birthday. A new flat screen TV. And it is sweet. I mean, it's legit. Right? I mean, look, I watched that flat screen yesterday, and it was painful watching it, but I watched that game yesterday on that flat screen, and I can kind of turn it, and you can hit sports mode or movie mode, and it changes a little bit. I mean, and it's a newer flat screen. Like, I had an older flat screen when they first came out, if you remember, and it was like that thick. The old flat screens, it was like 1,000,000 pounds, and it was barely hanging on my wall because it was so heavy. And this one you can lift with like one finger. You know, it's so flat. It's like, how in the world do they get this thing? But it's awesome. I can't believe my pastor has a flat screen. He does, right? And he likes it. Let me tell you why I got a flat screen, though. Because my last one broke. It busted. Like it just stopped working. The sound went, lines started happening in the screen. Let me tell you what that means. When something breaks, when something doesn't work, because I'm a good consumer, let me tell you what you do. You go buy another one. Come on. If it don't work, you go get another one. Here's the tension when it comes to our faith. In a post-truth society, when what we feel is what we believe, whether it's true or not, our gaze and affection are always shifting. Our attention is easily diverted, and whatever fuels your emotion gives way to your life. So listen to me. Here's what I'm saying. If the essence of your faith, like the bottom line of my faith is this: following Jesus works for me. I say this with a smile on my face. Let me tell you what you are. You're a consumer. I can't speak to how it works for anybody else. And I'm not saying it works for anybody else or it's completely true. Who am I to say that? I just know it works for me. You're a consumer. That's what you are. And what happens is, I'm not throwing stones, I'm just asking you the question. What happens is when we're a consumer, listen to me, when things get hard, don't be surprised when we move on to another thing or we get quiet and just kind of coast. That's what consumers do. It's not working anymore, so we put our gaze and affection toward other things. But listen, if the essence of your faith, Bethlehem Church, is this: I am confident that Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life, and let me tell you what you are. You're a witness. And my question is simply this: am I a consumer or am I a witness? I think it's such a prevalent question that we are going to come back to it time and time again over the next 18 months. Is the essence of my faith and my family's faith, well, it works for us. You're a consumer. Consumers like a faith that fits in their life. But let me tell you something. Witnesses have a story to tell because they've met the one who changes everything. Can I tell you, my friends, what our world, what your family, what our community's in desperate need of? Witnesses. You know what witnesses have? They are confident. Not only what they believe, but why they believe it, because it's changed their life and they're 100% sold. It's true, even if they don't feel it in that given moment. That's what a witness is. That's what I want to build in you. By the power of the Holy Spirit and the power of His Word, we have to be a congregation. We have to be a church that just doesn't consume, but we're witnesses. We're compelled. Paul says, call me crazy in 2 Corinthians 5. I can't help it. I've been compelled because my life has been changed. There's a deep confidence. Because Jesus is better. Better than what? Better than everything. Better than what? Better than anything. Better than what? Better than all things. So we're just going to lift up our confidence. Why? Because you and I don't know about God. We're going to lift up our confidence. Why? Because you and I don't know what God's like. We're going to lift up our confidence. Why? Because you and I know who God is, and His name is Jesus. And it's that name that there's power. It's that name that doesn't change. In fact, we're going to come back over and over to worship in this series, the idea. Listen, and we do that. Like when you come in on Sunday morning or Sunday evening, or when you enter one of our worship gatherings, usually the first few minutes we worship. Let me tell you why we do. Not because our musicians are that great. That's not it. We do it because Jesus deserves our worship, but listen to me, He doesn't need it. He deserves it, but you know who needs it? You and I. Because we need confidence. So let me give you the spoiler alert. You ever got a spoiler alert when you're going to go see a movie and somebody says, this happens? Let me give you the spoiler alert. Let me tell you how Hebrews ends. This is why. Jesus Christ, He is the same yesterday, He is the same today, and He is the same forever. The person sitting, listen to me, I want you to look at the person sitting to your right or left right now. Look at them right quick, whether you know them or not. Let me tell you what is true about them, and it's true about me. They aren't the same yesterday, today, and forever. Let me tell you about the problems in your life. Problem yesterday is probably not your problem today, and it probably won't be your problem tomorrow, but you will have one. Let me tell you about the pressures in life. They're always changing. And the confidence of our faith is Jesus is the same church yesterday, he's the same today, and he's the same forever. Confidence. You may not be confident in your bank account. You may have too much confidence in your bank account. You may not be confident in your marriage. You may have too much confidence in your marriage. You may not be completely confident in your kids. You may have too much confidence in your kids. You may not have much confidence in your job. You may have too much confidence in your job. You may not have a lot of confidence in your talent. You may have too much confidence in your talent. But what I'm telling you is if you've got to be overconfident about something, hear your pastor say this: let it be Jesus. Let it be Jesus. Will you pray with me tonight?